My brothers and sisters in Christ, both our second reading and the gospel today deal with an issue we've all felt. A reading from the second letter of St. Paul to the Corinthians. Brothers and sisters, that I, Paul, might not become too elated, because of the abundance of the revelations, a thorn in the flesh was given to me, an angel of Satan, to beat me, to keep me from being too elated. 3 times I begged the Lord about this, that it might leave me. But he said to me, My grace is sufficient for you, for power is made perfect in weakness. I will rather boast most gladly of my weaknesses, in order that the power of Christ may dwell with me. Therefore I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and constraints, for the sake of Christ. For when I am weak, then I am strong. The word of the Lord. As a kid, I used to run around outside barefoot. My mother was constantly warning me not to, because occasionally I'd scrape my foot on a rock or get a splinter. You'd think I'd learn, but my stubborn nature hasn't seemed to change. It's amazing how a small cut or a tiny fragment of wood can cause such pain. But every time I injured myself, I'd limp inside sulking, grateful for Mom's attentive care. This image of limping, of carrying a painful burden, is what St. Paul is describing in today's second reading. A thorn in the flesh was given to me, he says, an angel of Satan to beat me from becoming too elated. St. Paul is preaching the gospel across the known world, establishing new Christian communities. Although he's experiencing the incredible joy of introducing people to Jesus, he's also carrying a mysterious thorn in his flesh. What is it? What's causing Paul such pain? We don't know exactly. Some believe it was something physical. Paul may have suffered from partial blindness after the risen Christ appeared to him on the road to Damascus. Others associate this thorn with a physical wound resulting from being shipwrecked, beaten, or imprisoned. But most likely this thorn was a metaphor for other people's unbelief. Not everyone who heard Paul preach converted to Christianity. Some remained unconvinced or even hard of heart. Was Jesus really God? Or just a carpenter from Nazareth turned miracle worker? A person's refusal to believe in Christ pained Paul, much like a thorn in his flesh or a splinter in his foot. That same thorn of unbelief presses into Christ's heart in today's gospel. By this point in his ministry, he's healed people, cast out demons, and in last week's gospel, he even raised a 12-year-old girl from the dead. When Jesus returns home to see his family and friends, you would think he'd be welcomed as a hometown hero. But his identity is questioned, scrutinized instead. Where did this man get all this, they say? What kind of wisdom has been given him? Is he not the carpenter, the son of Mary? By not referencing Joseph, the crowd implies they're unsure who Jesus' father is. A missed opportunity to call him the Son of God. Frustrated and disappointed, Jesus leaves them. How many of us have felt like St. Paul or Jesus, frustrated, saddened by another person's unbelief? I'm sure we all love someone who hasn't yet come to faith, who struggles to believe, or whose heart may even be hardened toward the gospel. Perhaps the most difficult experience is watching our children struggle to believe. Like St. Paul, we do everything we can to instill faith in them. How painful it is when we see that faith unraveling before us. Similarly, how painful it is to see a friend, a spouse, or even we ourselves struggle with faith. Paul felt the same way about the early Christian communities. He risked his life to teach them about Jesus. While many came to believe, others simply didn't. The reasons were as varied then as they are today. Today there's the availability of false or misleading information online, peers who do not share their faith, a society that tells them to value image over substance, periods of unfair suffering, such as the loss of a loved one or being bullied. Paul reminds us today that we should neither be discouraged nor give up. The Lord is always with us, particularly when we are weak in faith. What can separate us from the love of Christ, he says? Trial or persecution, or nakedness or the sword? No, in all these things we conquer overwhelmingly through him who has loved us. Perhaps the best way to remove these thorns of doubt from our flesh is to plant seeds of faith instead. What we will offer here at St. Pius X is every opportunity possible to fall in love with Jesus and to strengthen our faith through prayer, worship, Bible studies, religious education, and youth group. And for those of them following us online, we will offer an online Mass and online Bible studies. We are a community of faith meant to love and support one another, both in times of celebration and in times of trial. May the Lord bless our efforts and fulfill the words once spoken through the prophet Isaiah. So is my word that goes out from my mouth. It will not return to me empty, but will accomplish what I desire and achieve the purpose for which I sent it.